All right. Hello, everyone. Happy Monday. I hope you're ready to make some art. I am very excited to be making art with you all today. Had kind of a rough weekend. So looking forward to making some art and letting it all go. I lost my wallet. That's a bummer. So one of the best ways that I know to deal with something that's stressful is to set that thing aside. I've done everything I can do. Right now, my job is to make art and share art with other people. And we can share that with each other as well. So that is what we'll be up to. You will want to have some ephemera around, as I teased on Mix today. So make sure that you've got some ephemera in reach, and we'll go to the overhead camera now. And I like to start when I'm making art, I like to start with just doing something that is fun and exploratory when I first sit down. So I'm going to go back to our wonderful sidekick for this box, which is the Niji Blender crayon. Again, it's totally transparent, different than a white crayon, and it lays on quite a bit of wax. Also would like to highlight here, look at this wonderful thing that's happening with my sewn spine binding. I have like almost this little gradation of color coming through from previous pages. And I'm really enjoying how that looks here on this page, because even though I'm coming to my journal to this blank page, it doesn't feel like that intimidating blank page, because there's a little bit there to start me off. Okay, so I've got kind of some good scribbling there, which you can't see yet with the wax all the way around the edge. And I wanted to show off kind of a weird, this is not an art tool. This is from a kitchen section of like a big box store. And I think it's for putting, for like basting things that are baking in the oven or cooking or barbecuing maybe. So it's got this interesting curve to it, and the bristles are kind of, you can probably hear them a little bit. They're kind of loud and they're very soft on the end. It's a pretty wide brush, but I thought it would be a good way to put down quite a bit of water all at once. So what I want to do is get this page pretty wet, because I want to show how you can see, even with no pigment on the paper yet, you can see where those wax lines are. You see where it's kind of making the water bead up, and also where it's soaking into the page a little bit, but not where the wax is. And one of the things that I really like about this clear blending crayon is that it's pretty solid layer of wax that goes on, which means that the resist that you get from it is just quite a bit more intense than from other tools. Okay, so I've got a good layer on there with my handy dandy brush. It also sits very nicely on your surface. I guess I could even hook it over the edge of, if I had a taller cup for my water, I could hook it over the edge and let it drip down, which is kind of a cool deal. So I'm going to go to first, I think, some watercolor into this. And again, when I'm just kind of landing for the day in my journaling, I like to start a little looser. So I'm going to grab a brush that's definitely seen better days, but I like it because it's got that more brushy quality to it. I'm going to start with some kind of intense peacock blue. So sometimes I will choose colors based on how I feel, and sometimes I'll choose colors based on how I would like to feel. So for me, how I would like to feel most of the time is calm and watery. So you can see just how effective that clear color with Blender is on this page. And a thing to notice, and you may have noticed this already if you've been playing with this tool in your journal, is it does make the pigment kind of bead up on the surface, which can be very handy if you're working on a page over time, because you can actually dip your brush into that and get a little bit more pigment onto your brush and move it around elsewhere. It's like a little reservoir of water for you while you're painting. Trying to get a little bit more of this intense color here. So now looking at the page, I have this kind of chaotic scribbling with the clear blender, and then I have mostly solid washes of color with a few little marks. And I think what I'd like to do next is add something with a little bit more control to it. So I'm going to take the Copic that I received in this month's box, which is like a smoky blue. And something that can be fun to try with your Copic markers or with any marker is, instead of using it to write or fill in, use it like a stamp. This technique also works with paint pens, especially the ones that have kind of rectangular shaped nibs, is you can use them to get interesting patterning. You can see that the wax crayon also resists the alcohol marker. So I'm stamping in some places into paper that has mostly dried, and in other places to where it's a little bit wet. You do want to be careful with your alcohol markers and not get them too wet, but it is okay to go onto pages that are kind of damp. Again, you just get a little bit of an interesting, different look that for your viewer or for you or anybody that happens to see what you're doing, it becomes a little bit more removed from the tool itself. And I always find that that's interesting, both in my art journals as well as in my mixed media art, is can I make it so that you don't know how I did this? Meaning you're not really sure what tools or what materials I used to get the effect that I got. Sometimes the frustration that you might feel with your art is when you look at it and you say, oh, well, I know exactly what pen made that line, and I know that's a rubber stamp, and that's this material. And we've talked about this a lot, this idea of how to distance what you've done from the means of creating it. Okay. Let me get one other thing that I'm going to add on this page. And now I'm going to go to a water-based marker. And hot tip, because I just did it myself. So the lid from the brush end, you would think, because most pens, you take the lid off and you put it on this side, but it doesn't fit. But it does this way, which I guess kind of makes more sense, right? You take it off and you turn it around and put it on to the other side. But it is different than some brush pens. So if you find your lid falling off, just turn it around and try it the other way. Just be careful that when you put the lid back on, you don't try to mash that end of the lid onto your brush tip, because you'll ruin the brush tip. I say this as an art therapist that's watched many people use pens and had that oh no moment of pens getting ruined, especially brush pens. So it's a useful thing to investigate when you get a new tool. How does this lid work and which side goes on? So just adding some thin lines here, pretty subtle. Because this is a water-based marker, if there's anything that I do that I end up feeling like I want, like it's too much, I can go back in with a brush and move it around a little bit. But I kind of like the idea of adding a little bit more of a repeating pattern. But as the paper dries, I have more ability to add more pigment with this. And when I work on a page like this, I don't generally have a plan. And for those of you that are new to art journaling, again, this might feel a little bit intimidating. What do you mean I'm just going to sit down and open up a page and not have a plan for how I'm going to put it together? And that's really what I want to focus on this time for our live stream, is what to do when you've started something and you're not really sure where it goes next, right? So we're going to let this page dry. I'm going to set it aside for a bit. And I'm going to pull out another page. ArtJournalSnacks journal. So this is a page that I started. I think I was doing this the other night, just needing to, similar to that blue page, I just needed to move some color around on the paper and enjoy the process. I was really loving how I was painting with this watercolor and then just letting the pigment wash out of the brush until it was down to almost nothing. And then some pigment coming through from the previous page and other things on here. But this page doesn't really feel complete to me, right? It feels like it needs something. And so this is where your little stash of ephemera can really come in handy. So I have a variety of things here on my desk. I had to reassemble after a little bird mayhem. And one of them I picked up the other day from just a sewing kit leftovers. And if any of you can name what this is before I name it, you should put it into the chat. But I picked it up because I, first of all, really liked the texture. I really liked the small holes in it and the little bit of embossing. And so if you know what it is, you should definitely put it into the chat. But I thought this would be a really interesting texture to create. And okay, your time is up. It has straight pins. So this is a piece of paper that you would put straight pins. Straight pins came in this. They've all been used up. But what a lovely little bit of paper ribbon. So with something like this, you could use a white glue, or you could use Mod Podge or the tacky glue that we got. But I want this to sit a little more flat in my art journal, so I'm going to use glue stick. And that is going to flatten out the embossing a tiny bit, but I'm okay with that. So I'm going to use this to break up some of the patterning that goes across the page, and then you can already see how this is going to change the kind of the separateness between these two pages. And that's something that I like to do right there, where I trim it to kind of look like this brush stroke goes over top, and then add this back on the other side, slightly askew. It's just a fun little way to weave something in without weaving it, right? Just by how I've layered it. Okay, so I have one more piece of this, and this becomes the difficult part. It's like, do I just put the one more piece on here? And technically I have 3, so it doesn't feel like an even number. And so I think that's what I'm going to do. Okay, there. When it crosses the gutter, really using your fingernail, or you can use a bone folder if you have one, or a burnishing tool. Just make it go into that gutter of the page. So this is starting to feel a little bit more cohesive to me, but I still feel like it needs something. Let's put the things aside. So another thing that I have on my desk is this came out of a book that was about museum curators or museum administration, but I thought it kind of related to some of the ephemera that you all got this month or this quarter with from the yearbook. I think these people, I mean, look at that lady and then look at that lady's hair. And this lady looks like she'd rather be anywhere else. And this guy looks very proud of himself and she looks very suspicious. So they're looking at somebody, maybe the speaker. This guy is not paying attention at all. And this guy is like, when's lunch? Then the thing that I've really enjoyed watching is how some of you have been adding captions to your little funny people. So I think I'll cut these people out of their background. At least partially. Because that background is a lot of white space that's going to cover up some of the interesting parts of the watercolor that I already have on this journal page. And so that's the risk, right? Like you put down some really cool pigment, and you're really excited about how it looks, but then it just doesn't seem to work as a page or it doesn't feel complete. But then everything you add, you're kind of bargaining with yourself. Like, what do I feel okay with covering up? And I know it's there, and I enjoyed painting it. And what really needs to be visible still, right? So like I'm okay with covering up that splotch there. It's not the end of the world if it stays on the page, but I'd be fine covering that up. I'd be less okay covering up some of this because I really like the mark making on that side. So I think I'll leave the table, the full table for this, but cut out this background. And I'm going to save it because I can see that there's writing on the backside and there might be some words that end up being interesting that I'll want to include. Of course, with a background like this, like a plain background, it also invites more mark making. So if you don't have the patience for cutting out all these little figures, you could totally leave it and just add more pigment back in. So see, there's some interesting words maybe on this side that I'll use later. All right, so now comes where do they go? And I could line them up perfectly with this. I'll lose a little bit of that guy's face in the gutter, but that would be all right. Or I could line them up on this side with one of these lines coming down. If I did that, I would end up here and not lose any of their faces into the gutter. I'd cover a little bit of this page, but I think I'd feel okay about that. So that looks like a good plan to me. So I definitely am going to have that part be the middle, but then the decision becomes, do I want them up high? And that's kind of interesting, or would I rather have them down here so they're anchored on something? They have lots of room for their thoughts or non-thoughts up above them. And I think that's going to be my plan. If you've not tuned in for a live stream before, what I have down underneath my art journal is actually a pet training pad. And this has been a relatively recent addition to my art desk and workspace because it's very absorbent. So if I spill water or ink or paint or anything, it is more easily absorbed by this being underneath. And once it's kind of earned its keep, I can put a new one down. It works really nicely without making quite such a mess on the workspace. And different than putting just paper down, it's much more absorbent. So I'm less worried about getting very messy and using a lot of liquid media. Okay, so I am liking this so far. So now I'm going to take a look at the words that I cut away and see if there's anything Not really. Well, the only word that really stands out to me is another. So I'm just gonna grab that one. Mostly looks like just a list of the people who came. I don't really see anything in there that's all that interesting, but I like this word. Maybe what I'll do is put it. Okay, and then here's another opportunity to use this wax crayon. Just to kind of put a little wax down to ensure that if I do add more media onto this page, this white of this paper will stay. Mashing down the extra wax with the end here. It's a little cold in my place today. So you may have noticed that when it's cold, it balls up a little bit. And you can heat it up with your fingers or with a heat tool or work in a warmer area. It works all the same. It's just a little bit, I find this is a little bit more of a, slightly more of a warm weather in the spring tool.
Hey, Erin, we have some feedback in the chat from Sherry. I have a harder time finishing a page that I start without a plan when I begin by gluing down ephemera rather than just creating a background first. I often end up feeling like I've ruined some great ephemera.
Okay, great question. And we will, when we finish this page, we'll do the absolute opposite of what we've just done. So we'll start on a blank page and put down a piece of ephemera, and then we'll work our way around, not feeling like we ruined the ephemera. It's a really, it's one of those things where it's like, gosh, I can feel like I ruined this painting that I love. And oh my gosh, the pressure of what if I mess up this very epic, only exists in one place piece of ephemera, right? It's the thing that can sometimes make us feel fearful about using like some kind of precious thing, right? A note from a family member who's died, or a vintage picture, or something else that just feels like there's only one of these and it's precious. And what if I mess up the page, right? It's kind of the flip side of the coin from, ooh, I really like these marks that I make, and what if putting these silly looking people on here ruins it? But I'm kind of liking how this page is coming along. It's almost like this is the question that they're all asking, like, another? Nope, I'm not going to pay attention. And this guy is thinking about whether he can have another dessert at lunch, and you can kind of work your way across there and tell the story of it. Okay, so let's go to a blank page. Mostly blank. Okay, we'll go to a mostly blank page. How about that? And let me get a more precious feeling piece of ephemera.
And while you're grabbing ephemera, we have another question in the chat. Can you say anything about the Viviva color sheets you're using? I'm not familiar with those.
Oh, they're fabulous. Featured, what were they featured in, Sarah?
They were in an ArtSnacks box probably last year or 2022. They're awesome. They're very convenient. And they're just highly pigmented sheets of watercolor. So the second you hit it with water, the pigment starts to develop. So let me see if I have them in the shop.
And I can also say that they can survive having coffee spilled on them. I poured an entire cup of coffee in my backpack, and these ones had coffee poured on them, but they're still good. I like art supplies that can survive my sometimes chaotic life. Okay. So here's a cool piece of ephemera, because this is from a book. This is from a book of like wire sculptures. And I'm going to cut around this thing and it'll become the center of this page. So I think, you know, to answer that question about what do you do when you're worried that you're going to like ruin the page that's based around this piece of ephemera, a book page is a really good example because, you know, there's only one. It's not a photocopy. It's not a printout. If you are super concerned, right? Like maybe you have this piece of ephemera and you like really, really love it, or it's a family heirloom or something like that. You know, you can make a copy, you can take a photograph, can do different things, and then you can either use the original, which would be my recommendation just because it has a little bit more resonance to it. It's the real thing. But again, if it feels very, very precious and you feel more comfortable making art around it or responding to it on a copy, let's do that. Okay, so here's my interesting wire sculpture. Move it down. So originally I was thinking about putting that in the middle of the page, but this can be your start number one. Like say you had a page from an art history book and it was a famous painting. Like what if you put it on the edge and part of it was coming off and you attach that other piece on the other side, right? So don't be afraid to cut the ephemera apart before you put it down. And then what I like to do is look at it and say, well, okay, what else? What else can I do to this that's going to feel interesting? And so the first thing that comes to mind, since there are a lot of concentric circles on this, is like, what if I added more circles? Maybe we'll do that with kind of a thicker pen. So this is one of our fine liners that we got in this one. So what I'm going to do with this pen is create more spaces that I can make marks in. So already, just with a couple of circles, this is starting to feel like it lives on the page. Because that's what you want to do ultimately, is have your ephemera feel like it exists there. It's not stuck on top, but rather it's part of the page. And this is when you're putting the ephemera down first, or when you're putting the ephemera down afterwards, after you've done mark making. You want to make it look like it belongs there. So now I want to start with some straight lines. This is wire sculpture also has some straight lines in it. And this is kind of a fun thing that when you use a fibrous piece of paper in a very juicy ink pen, you can actually get these neat lines. So I'm turning from where the paper is underneath my index finger and dragging away. You can see I get these nice little drag lines. So a ruler is great, but if you don't have one, what else can you do? And then what are the possibilities because you're using non-traditional tools? You've got a good one there. Okay, cool. So that's starting to feel kind of interesting to me. And now what else, right? What else can I add on to this? So I'm going to start with, yellow because there's 40 some yellow coming through from that other page and just like fill in a whole area. Just did that with my head. Little art journal earthquake. One of the things I really like about these aqua brushes is you really can get a lot of pigment on the page pretty quickly. If you're really highly pigmented, juicy. And then because they're water-based, once I've got a critical mass of that yellow onto the paper, I can use a brush to continue to spread that pigment around. So you can think about incorporating ephemera into your journal as like either the idea that you have guides the ephemera that you choose, or the ephemera that you choose guides what else you put down on the paper. So what do I mean by that? I mean, like sometimes maybe you have an important piece of ephemera from your life. Maybe it's a concert ticket or a receipt from a special meal, or again, like a family photograph. And that thing is going to play a big role in the colors that you choose and the type of media that you use and how you choose to fill up the rest of the page. Or you come to your journal with like a certain emotion or feeling or thing that's going on in your life and you make marks and then you pick the ephemera that best represents what it is that you're trying to explore. So maybe you had a difficult Monday today and you're like scribbling and putting lots of pigment down on the paper. And then you look at it and you've got a big mess and you could think something like, okay, well, what would be the perfect animal to add to this big mess that I made that represents how I'm feeling right now? And then you could search out an image of that animal, put it down and add it and things like, okay, yes, that is exactly, that's exactly how I feel, right? This like big tangle of scribbles and this very grumpy looking half hibernating bear. It's like, I was not ready for Monday. Right? So with this, looking at it now, it's like it needs a character. It needs someone to be in here. And one of the things that I have here, I was thinking about cutting up, was a birdseed bag. And I see a little nut hatch here. That would be perfect. So this little guy, this looks like he wants to be on this, perching on this wire somehow. Leave that little bit of gold in there. And then it's kind of just finding a place. So there's a little bit of almost a circular edge there. And even though this black is going to cut into that circle, I like the way that that looks. So for this one, I'm going to use the tacky glue that we got in the box, because this is a plastic bag, so this is going to be the best way to stick this guy down. Realize I set it up higher than where I had it before, but I kind of like that better. Again, this is one of those things about art journaling, is sometimes you have to go with what happens. And I know for some of you, that's maybe not a comfortable place or where you are used to being with making art. You don't have a plan, or you want to know all the rules. And one of the things about art journaling is there's just not as many rules. And if that's intimidating to you, that rest assured that's normal. We humans like to have plans and rules. We like to know what to expect. And art journaling can show us that there's all sorts of beautiful things that can happen with the unexpected. So because there's green in the background of this bird, I'm going to add a bit of green in here. This is a wax crayon stick, so this will create a little bit of resist. So at a certain point when I'm working on a page, the piece of ephemera becomes a little bit less precious. Right? And I don't mind marking over the top and adding other things. Because I feel more like, okay, I know what's going to happen on this page. I feel a little bit more brave about using it maybe. And we start thinking about what else needs to go here. So I see this little bit of text from the back side of this page that the wire came from. And that can help to anchor the bird onto this paper a little bit. Another thing I'll do, since there's gold here in this, I'll add a little bit of gold into some sections here. It can be a little tricky with metallics because sometimes they can kind of take over. So I really like to think about how I can add them. The first word that came to mind was responsibly. Be responsible with metallic colors, meaning that I'm not going to kind of go overboard and then color everything with metallic. So what can I do that starts to look gold-like, but isn't gold? A little bit of like a more golden yellow, a little warmer yellow than the Lyra. So now I'm using the lines of this original sculpture more as lines paint inside. You can see the wax resist that's happening there, and then I'm going to go back in. Trusty clear blending crayon. And see how I can go even over the top of the gold and over the top of these printed lines, and nothing is obscured. Whereas with a white crayon, there would be a little bit of a fading. Gonna add a little bit more color here. Then we'll let this one dry. Gonna get a little more green into this. So I don't feel like that page is done, but it feels like it has a direction to go. So I'm gonna set it aside and let that dry, and then I'll probably come back in and, you know, I might decide that I want to paint out certain areas of this sculpture because it looks a little bit busy. So what if I filled in certain areas with like solid paint color? Could also just go for it with the metallic and add more metallic. Or there's this dark that's behind little nuthatch, so maybe I'll add more dark to it. It feels right now when you look at this page as a whole, there's like a little bit of dark over here, there's a little dark here where these wires come together, but otherwise the look and feel of the whole page feels pretty flat as far as contrast. So I might want to do something that adds one more element that's a little more contrasting. So it might be, you know, a dark line that goes behind everything, to be determined. Okay, so I'm gonna set that aside and go back to this blue page from before, because now I have a pretty good home for something.
Erin, I just want to jump in here. We are halfway through class. And Jackson has opinions about it. Sorry about that.
Cool. All right, so I wanted to show putting something onto a page that does obscure quite a bit of the work, right? So this, as you can see, this is from a plastic bag from, I think, something I got at the farmer's market last weekend. So what I liked about this was the triple thank you. And then the fact that it told me to recycle the bag. And I don't know that this is what they had in mind, but this is what I'm gonna do. And this is one of those moments where you have to kind of look at something and say, oh my gosh, am I okay with losing this beautiful stuff that's happening right here? And I am going to take a little bit of my own medicine and say, yes, I am. I'm going to do that. And for this, it's a thin plastic, but I think I want something a little bit more, that covers a little bit more. So I'm going to use some Mod Podge on this. And first I'm going to cover this whole section. Now with a really thin plastic bag, there's a couple ways you could think about putting it down. You could glue around the edges and let it be loose, or you could very carefully adhere it to the page, or you could put it on the page and build some wrinkles into it. So if you put enough adhesive down, whether that's glue that you've spread out or Mod Podge or matte medium, and you move it around a little bit as you're sticking it down, you'll get some interesting wrinkles that will take a little bit longer to dry, but they become spots where you could force a little bit of pigment underneath, and also spots where you can create some more interesting texture on the page. And so now you can see that this risk was worth taking, right? Because I actually ended up getting quite a bit of that pigment to show through underneath. And I am liking the way that it looks so far. So I'm going to take, switching to matte medium now, just to get these edges down a little bit more. You could also use tissue paper around the edge of something like a plastic bag like this to really make it blend into the page a little more. Meaning leveling out the surface, so you've got one surface to work on. So I like the way that wrinkle makes it look like it says, please cycle this bag. Because the re part is getting a little obscured. It's kind of what you're doing, right? You're cycling it from its use as a bag into its use as part of your art journal. And this is just, yeah, it's very satisfying to me to look at something like this because the closer you look at the way this was screened onto the plastic, you can see the little dot system that's on here. It's slightly askew. It's just feeling, yeah, it's really joyful and fun to look at. All right, so we'll let that net medium dry. And as we've been talking about on Mix, I usually, since doing Art Journal Snacks, I usually have 3 journals in process. I have another page here that's in that same vein of like, something interesting is happening on this page. Sarah was actually working on this page while we were chatting today about upcoming Art Journal Snacks fun.
Very productive meeting.
And I thought this would maybe be a good spot for a couple pieces of ephemera that I have here on my desk. First thing I thought of was this. This came in our small ephemera envelopes, and I like the kind of irregularity of this with this more regular pattern. I also have this little bit of rice paper. This feels a little too wild for it. I like this little sign language Z. I also like that this was one of the ones that they couldn't really show you in the image, right? Because you have to draw the Z when you're signing the letter Z. So it just almost so works as like it's pointing somewhere. And this works really well for me for today because I do this fun group with the older adults that I work with where we look up weird words in the frontistery, which is a dictionary of weird and obscure words. And one of our words today had a very satisfying Z in it. And it was, yeah, it's a fun tool. So if you haven't ever played with that, the frontistery, I'll link it in the post after the recording is live. Okay, so now I've got this that I've created and this that I'm adding on as ephemera. Then I've got this piece of rice paper and it's a cut piece. And one of the things that's so nice about rice paper is this beautiful deckled edge you can get when you rip it. So I would rather use that deckled edge against this flat edge of the other cut piece. So people might not be able to know just at looking at this page that this is kind of evidence of or representation of my day today. But as I'm creating it and telling you the story of it, then you're like, oh, okay, this is evidence of a meeting and evidence of something that happened just before the meeting. And it will be, and then put that here. And then I'm gonna take, I got this metallic pen, and this one has a really nice, I think these Deco Gel pens have such a nice, satisfying amount of pigment they put down. This works really well to blend my little hand into this page. And then I can think about what do I want to write to think about today. And so one of the ways that I start writing sometimes in my journal is to start with a prompt like this. Today was about. And then I think, how would I answer that? Well, if I was to describe to you what today was about, I could kind of click through in my mind the day and what was it about? It was about So when I do something like that and I write, I try not to censor myself. I try to write everything that comes to mind, and I try not to worry that I'm going to miss something. So today was about phone calls and laughter and truth and too much fun in the hallways. I had a lot of like random hallway laughing with people at work today, and honesty and death, but in a good way. And I write that because we had some interesting conversations at work today about like death and dying practices all over the world, and they were really beautiful. And I love that I work somewhere where that can just happen. It's not scary. It's something we can talk about, and that makes kind of chaotic times feel like you're in a place where people can talk about hard things. Okay, so now looking at this page, it still needs something, right? It feels like this side is maybe coming together a little bit more. This side feels like it's not quite there. It needs something. So I'm just going to think with a little bit of wax. This is my thinking behavior is to take a tool and just add pigment to a page while I think about what I might want to do next. And it's not just because I'm on a live stream that I'm doing that. I really do this when I'm sitting down journaling the end of the day or early in the morning. Sometimes I'll just make marks while I plan out what's next. And so one of the things I'm noticing is I have this funny little spot down here where there's no pigment and there's no paper. So I definitely want to add something there. I know I said that earlier about being careful with your goals, but I'm just about to add some more gold to this. And this, believe it or not, is not gold acrylic paint, but rather gold gesso, which is pretty cool. It's got a little bit of a tooth to it when it dries, so it makes a neat texture. And I'm going to cover my words a little bit. And some of you have been posting some images on Mix that do similar, where you write something and then cover it or obscure it a little bit. And, you know, a way to weave your writing into the essence of the page, but maybe make it a little less vulnerable, or not have to explain it so much, or give yourself room to add something else, right? So if you're doing that, today was about prompt. Were there other things that didn't come out in that initial writing that you want to add in? Then you could do something where you have an opportunity to do a little more writing or a little more listening if you have. So because of the black that's in there, I feel like I just need to add more black. And these lines that I'm adding, you've seen me do this before, but this is somewhere that then can become a place to do more writing. And because this is written in my handwriting, if I write into these lines, which I may or may not do, I might just like how they look going across this page. But if I do write into those lines, I'd probably write with like a block letter, or I might even print something out or stamp it and do something so that I don't have like two blocks of text that are competing with each other. That an awareness to have when you're working with multiple text elements on a page. And some of you may have encountered this where you have a page that ends up being like, is this a journal, or is this, you know, a collage of words, or what is this page all about? So just a thing to think about when you're working. Okay, I'm gonna let this ink dry. So the other thing I said to save for today was if you got a letter, Put some wax paper in here so that my page doesn't stick together. So my friend recently sent me a thank you note, her birthday present that I sent her, and of course she's another art therapist, so of course we have some nice washi tape on here. And the page that I'm going to put this onto is a page that, again, I was just doing because it felt good, just making kind of a plaid with watercolor. And I scribbled over top with some other media just to make it a little less regular, but it still needs something, right? So when this letter arrived from my colleague, I thought, well, this is exactly perfect because the colors of what she sent match really nicely. And I always joke with people that if you send me mail, it absolutely is going to go into my art journal. And a thing to do before you stick it down is kind of look and say, is there anything about this envelope I want to share? I'm going to cover addresses. I really like the way that she wrote my name, so I actually do want to have the envelope. So I'm going to take the card out. Sometimes I'll stick the whole envelope in. But in this case, I'm going to just use the card. And I'm going to save the way she wrote my name. This is someone I was in the doctoral program with, so we always address each other that way if it feels important. Okay, so there's that. It's the love stamp, and then again, this is that dilemma of like, what do I cover, right? Am I more interested in keeping this part, which is kind of interesting, where the pigment's pushed away, or am I more interested in keeping this part? So you kind of have to just try all the things and see which works better. If I put it this way and it opens like this, that kind of makes more sense in the way in the shape of the book. So I think that's what I'm going to do. I'll glue it here with the fold into the gutter of the book. Not too close though, if you can get away with it so that it doesn't get messed up when you unfold and fold the page. And then this, maybe I'll have this go across the gutter a little bit. And you're seeing me use my glue stick straight onto my journal page, and I do that because I don't mind messes on my pages, and I find that actually the more messy the page gets, the more things that are media that are on there, just the more interesting it gets. Right, you can see there's a little bit of glue stick over gluing there, and that's going to end up becoming another interesting texture on this page. Two tiny little washi scraps here that I think I can add in. And then here's that same situation, right? Where then these almost seem like they're kind of plopped on, and the washi tape here, it's working because it's disappearing behind the card, but here it's just kind of on the surface. So what do you do to make this page work a little bit better? And so I think what I'd like to do is play up on the hearts in the forever stamp here. Could do it with the flowers, but I think I want to on what's going on with the hearts. And I've got a little bit of this. This is some cool paper that I got in my ephemera pack. And maybe what I'll do make kind of an exaggerated, elongated heart. And you have to think about things with like symbols like hearts, right? If I cut this in half the way that I did with that other piece of ephemera, the piece of ephemera that held the straight pins, where I just cut it. When you cut a heart in half, that has a certain symbolism, right? So here, if I cut this around the shape where that love is, that works better. Now, because this is a thicker paper, glue stick can hold it, but I would rather use tacky glue for this just to make sure it stays put. I'm really liking this little squeezy tube of tacky glue. I'm used to using it in a large bottle, and very often it's kind of hard to fit on my journaling surface and can be messy, and I really like the way this is working. Just have to remember to put the lid back on. So just one more thing I want to do on this is I've got the part where I cut the heart out, and I really like to save at least part of that to continue the line. So you have to trim it a little bit. So it almost feels like a ripple or an echo from the original shape. Like when you throw a stone into the water and it ripples outwards. How can you do that with the ephemera that you took out by cutting it apart and then sticking those little parts on? And this also accomplishes that need to make that little piece that I stuck on of the washi tape from the back of the card to make it incorporate in a little bit more. Okay. Cool. So I am liking the way that looks, and I'm going to let that glue dry. And in the meantime, I would love to see if anyone would like to share what they've been working on either today or other things they've been working on or questions that they have, and make sure that we have time for that.
Awesome. So if anybody wants to share, feel free to turn your camera on. You can physically raise your hand. You can put your virtual hand up and I will look for you. I also feel like this was a productive class. You've done 2 journals and like 4 pages, 2 spreads, 3 journals. I lost track. Most productive Monday I've ever had in a while. Or witnessed in a while. I have a question that I'd like to pose to Erin, and then if anybody else wants to answer. We've sent a lot of adhesives in the ArtJournalSnacks boxes. I really like this tacky glue like pen version. Do you like it? And also, do you have any other favorites that we've featured in the past in regards to adhesives? So Erin, feel free to answer that first if anybody else wants to chime in.
My answer is going to be my ride or die adhesive. It's always my favorite. Like,
Forgot about that. The permanent glue stick.
yeah, it's like, why have they not sponsored me yet? And why don't I like drive around in a giant glue stick car? I mean, really, like, I would totally do that. I think way back when a certain energy drink came out and they had cars that were shaped like that energy drink can. I'm not going to name it, but anyways, they were like giant ones of those. I would totally drive around in a giant Scotch permanent glue stick. I would totally.
I support that. I feel like there are worse things that you could drive around in, and a glue stick sounds great. I'm just looking through the chat here. A lot of you like the Scotch glue stick as well. All right. We have a fan club now. Tacky glue, also getting some good feedback.
The double-sided tape. Yeah.
Also really great.
Sided tape has such a good use case in an art journal for like, especially adding pages in. It's one of
Yes.
the ways to add pages in. Yeah, cool.
So cool. Yeah, double-sided tape. Forgot about that.
Oh, for postcards. Yeah, totally. It's such a good tool.
Yeah, it was like it's a whole nother category that the ArtSnacks team has to think about because we've just been about art supplies for so long. So I'm glad everyone is taking to the different adhesives that we use. Okay,
Chicken.
great. Anybody else want to share what they're making? Adhesives, as long as they're not messy.
Hmm.
Yeah, I have to say my favorite Mod Podge is generally leans messy. So I don't know. I like messy. Ooh, okay. I see a hand up. Jill, I'm going to spotlight you, so feel free to unmute. Hello.
Hello. Oh, it's facing me. No, I don't want that.
Oh no, you muted yourself.
Okay, can you hear me now?
We can hear you, and now we can see you.
Okay. Did I freeze?
There
Can
we
you
go.
see?
We can see it.
Okay.
Oh no.
You're a little glitchy, Jill.
I really don't.
Oh man.
Um,
Jill, you are coming in and out. I'm
my
sorry.
graduates page, and I just had some sayings the way to make art, and then what? Hopefully you can see that. I think
There we go.
I may have froze.
If you haven't seen this on Mix, I really recommend. It's such a fun page. And again,
Thank you.
ephemera envy. And it's just a fun page for sure.
Yeah, I had a great time doing it. Thank you I love the little graduates. That was the best.
Super fun. Endlessly
Yeah,
fun.
thank you. Thanks.
Thanks for sharing, Jill. We will definitely look at it on Mix as well. But I did get a glimpse of that, so that looks awesome. I have not used my graduates yet from the ephemera. I gotta find a good spot for them. Anybody else feel like sharing what they made today or what they're working on? We have about 15-ish minutes. So Erin, if you want to hop back in, we can leave like 3 or 5 minutes at the end.
Yeah, I will. I'll share this journal that's about to finish. So like I'll probably finish it tonight after our live stream. A little watercolor journal. And I started this on April 14th. Sometimes what I'll do when I'm starting a journal is I'll write like where and why. And I was teaching a puppets and dolls class up in Oregon. So some of you saw this page on Mix, some of these pages you've seen on Mix, but some of them, like a page like this is one where I think for me, a piece of ephemera would ruin this page. You all know I love ephemera, but I don't want to glue anything onto this page. It just felt really satisfying to make and then just leave, right? Just let it be. So that's a good lesson, is to not feel like you always have to stick a bunch of things down, but you can just layer some different media. And I did this side first, and then I added, and then the black lines, and then I added the rest of this watercolor later, and then a little bit of white pigment with the white brush pen that we got, I think in box number 1, back onto this page. Some pages playing with different media. This is kind of fun because I have, let's see if I can get all of them. So we've been doing a drawing practice at my work. And we've all been drawing from still life. See if I can find the other from this same setup. So one of the things that I brought was a bunch of those plaster. Yeah, here it is. So a bunch of those plaster human forms. So here's one, and here's another view of the same still life. So with, again, with like writing and other things in there. So that's a fun one. Playing with wax resist. This was about going to the museum. This was about a sad thing that happened at work, and that has a little bit of an interactive element which hangs out the side, giving it a good journal side view here. Here's my graduate. This is how that page finished. More writing. This one was just satisfying words, different way, right? So two different ways to think about a page with a single word. This was from another of the still life drawing practices. These are marquee quotations. They're super cool. And this was kind of a reaction in a meeting that I was in. I didn't like the word someone was using, so my coping mechanism was to put it in my art journal, and then I kind of made the page feel a little better with the colors that I used. This was about, again, kind of a response to something that someone said to me, and then it ended up all being undone in the end. So, meaning like it wasn't the big deal that I made it out to be in my head. Going out to dinner with my aunt and uncle. So here's a business card from a restaurant. If you're ever in Calistoga, I'd recommend this place. Very good. A random post-it note that I found in some stuff that it fell out of a magazine when I was teaching, and it's the boardroom table at a former workplace, and so it had a lot of nostalgia attached to it. This is Meadow. She's my new flock member here. She's right now making a big mess, I can hear. But the portrait of her and the pickup form from supplies that I got for her on her first day here. And then the next day I was teaching, and someone happened to find this perfect piece of ephemera to go in here, which is definition of pigeon. Don't underestimate your produce tags. They make really wonderful inclusions in your journal. So I was just thinking about like the colors of the garden and patterning in the garden. This is another view of still life, and here's another. This was a vase with tulips, and then I added the paper on later to get the white of the kind of the reflective white on the edge of the vase, and then I added kind of stereotyped tulip shapes. And then here's another version of the vase with the tulips. We're experimenting with trying to do things as kind of as light and loosely as possible. And then these three stones were also on the still life table. More of this. This is just, if you haven't done this before, I know I've demoed this maybe a couple of times before, but just the enjoyment of making plaid with wet into wet watercolor is so fun. And then here's more of the wax resist, watermelon tag, medical visit. Everything can be ephemera. This page just felt good to paint. Taking a break. Same thing here. These next couple pages I did like all in one sitting, just sitting down with some watercolor and enjoying putting the watercolor onto the surface. There's a little bit of salt in here. And same thing here. This one has a little bit of gold. This one I did mostly today. And then here's this one. And then tonight I'll finish this page. So I'll post it on Mix when I'm done, and probably on Instagram as well. And then I will move on to the next auxiliary journal.
What a good feeling to like finish a sketchbook.
Yeah, it's such a good feeling. It really is. But let me just say this, that like you don't have to fill every page. So if you are getting, you know, itchy about like, oh gosh, someone gave me a new journal, or oh gosh, the next Art Journal Snacks journal is coming. I've not finished this other one. Give yourself permission to do something drastic. Like, what if I just wrote words, single words in the middle of each of these last 5 pages? Or what if I just like drew a line across there, or did something, you know, kind of simple? Give yourself permission for that, because there's no use in like suffering in your art journal just to fill every page. You can add things to every page anyway, right? So just a little permission slip there for that. Sarah, should we talk about what's coming up next?
I was actually just thinking about that. Not necessarily like housekeeping, but like just some upcoming events. So today's Monday. Saturday is World Collage Day. It's an international holiday. Not many people know about it, but we are celebrating it by doing a live stream on YouTube. We're doing a little bit something different. So we are testing out some new software on YouTube. Erin and I will be doing some collaging together, talking about collage, talking about ephemera, and also just celebrating what is collage. So please join us. It's 1 p.m. Eastern time on Saturday, World Collage Day live stream on YouTube. I will make sure that the link is spread across the internet so everyone can join us. Unfortunately, it won't be in a scenario like this where you can show off your work, but there will be a chat so everyone can leave comments, leave feedback, ask questions, and we'll be making sure to answer some of those questions, acknowledge your comments. We have some cool software that allows us to present ideas and collaborate on things too. So we're very excited to test that out. So again, that's this Saturday, 1 p.m. Eastern time. It's going to be similar length to an Art Journal Snacks class. So I think it's like 90 minutes. And we're very excited about it. So make sure that you tell your friends and get your ephemera ready. Erin, what do you recommend? Bring your art journal, or you want to use regular paper? What do you think?
I would say bring your art journal. Like, why not, right? This is such a great opportunity to incorporate collage. You might have some pages that maybe you've painted colors already. They're ready for collage. I would say plan to have like one blank page at least, and then maybe one page that's got something there that you're collaging onto. I'll certainly be taking that tack of having some prepared surfaces, maybe just with color, to incorporate collage onto. And then, of course, bring some good cutting tools, bring your favorite adhesives, bring some wax paper so that you can put that down in between your pages as you're turning them. And definitely post what you do, since we won't have the share component on there of your images. Please, please, please post what you make on Mix so we can see, or tag us on Instagram or anywhere else you're posting.
Yay. I think the only other thing to mention is later in the month, May 22nd. It is a Wednesday. Erin and I will be doing our next ephemera hour, 8 p.m. Eastern time, on YouTube as well. The biggest issue I'm having is what ephemera do I use for World Collage Day, and what ephemera do I hold on to for ephemera hour? I don't know. I'm trying to decide what to do. So usually when we have an ephemera hour, that means the next box is coming out soon. So the summer box will be very exciting. Or the spring box. Are we in spring?
We're in spring now, the summer
We're in
box.
spring. Summer box is later in the summer. All the subscriptions are staggered, so I always mix some of them up. So this is the spring box. You can call it whatever box you want, actually, but it just so happens to be coinciding with that season. So yeah, very excited for things to come. We have about 6 minutes left. So if anybody else last minute wants to show what they created, Cynthia has her hand up. I am going to spotlight you, Cynthia. Feel free to unmute yourself and turn on your video. You have a virtual hand raised.
There we go.
Hello. Don't forget to unmute yourself.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. So I've been using my journal therapeutically the past couple of weeks. So week before last, for the first time, I had to go to a double funeral.
Aww.
My aunt died, and then before we could bury her, my cousin died. And then 2 days later, my dad remarried. My 84-year-old dad got married. So that was good. So it was just a lot of things all in one. So this page is not done yet, but I put the little things. So I got to get a picture of the couple in here. So then I decided to chase that the next week, last week, with somebody T-boning me. So it was not a good accident. If it had been on the driver's side, I wouldn't be sitting here talking to y'all right now, but I was unaware of how much glass could actually explode within a vehicle when you get hit like that. So I literally found a piece of glass in my bra and I glued it in here. And with I found glass literally just like everywhere. And so we had to go empty the vehicle out. And this is all just this random stuff I found because we've had this Jeep for a long time. And so like a piece of wrapping paper from a Christmas. And so I cut that out. And literally shortly before the accident, this little butterfly, I found it right next to my Jeep. And it was so pretty and perfect. And so I picked it up and I put it in the floorboard in the back seat. And then we go the next day to clean it out. And he was still just laying there perfect, even though he was surrounded by broken glass and all. So I put him there. I don't know how he'll last, but anyway, it's been a couple of 2 weeks. And so, but I appreciate it. I've been using my journal to kind of just get this out and remember this week. 2 weeks. 2 weeks of life, just a lot of life. Anyway, thought I'd share that. Not my greatest art, but this has been much more therapeutic than trying to do art.
Cynthia, thank you so much for sharing that, sharing the work, and I hope your body is healing okay, and that I'm glad that your art journal is a good place to put this.
Yeah.
And great job on using some of that ephemera to incorporate into the journal itself. Totally would have taken the glass myself and put it into my
I had to keep a piece. I just had to do something with it, and that was the safest way I could do that.
Yeah, that's great. One thing for the butterfly that you might think about doing is taking like a clear piece of plastic, something over the top, not stuck onto it, but just like glued around the edges.
I was wondering about that. I feel like he's going to fall apart.
Yeah, so almost making like a little frame with glue and then
over him
here over.
Okay. I was wondering if I was going to end up having to take him back out because I can already tell like he's very fragile.
Yeah, and that way you're not, because if you
Okay.
break over the top, it's probably going to ruin it. But if you
Yeah.
its own little
Okay.
house.
That's a good idea. Okay, I will do that.
Thank you for sharing that. And again, you know, so sorry for all the difficult things, and then the
It happens. It was just a little all together right this time.
a lot of life. That's a lot of life.
A lot of life. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing. Woo. Let's see. Anybody else? I'm trying to spotlight. Can I do that? Oh, there we go. Got 1 minute left.
All right, so with 1 minute, I want to
Yeah, what can you do in 1 minute?
do 1 minute. With 1 minute, you can make yourself a space to either do some writing or some other thinking. I'm just making myself a little question mark. And making myself some lines to write on, or because these lines are thick, it would also be a good place to put some collaged words and phrases that maybe would spell something out. And then one of the other things that I like to do when I'm gonna turn this pencil so you don't see what it says, little profanity pencil, is scratch back into the acrylic paint when it's thick like this. Then I just get some more interesting texture. All right, cool. So now I have a spot to either ask myself a question or answer a question. We'll see what ends up happening. And also make a nice mess on my hands, which is the best way to end is how much mess did you make? We should do like a show of hands at the end because I also got it all the way up my arm too.
Oy. All right, everyone. Well, we're at time. So I just want to thank everyone for joining us live. We appreciate you. And thank you for those who shared. Erin, thank you for your time as well. Great time to work, get things done, get some stuff out in the journal. Always a good time here. So the recording, I'll make sure it's posted tomorrow or Wednesday if anybody wants to rewatch it. And I hope to see all of you on Saturday. All right. Have a great night, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.
You're welcome.